I've been saying good morning, but it's afternoon. It's normally morning. It's normally morning.
I did too.
12:30. Parking's much better this time.
Is it?
Thank you.
Oh, that's great. That's good. That's
Usually
good.
it takes me about a
information.
half hour or so to find parking.
It's a good tip. Well, it is 12:30 and we do have a quorum that I can see. So why don't we just take roll and see who's here.
Thank you so much.
And then we can move on with our agenda. I'm here in Albany in the conference room. Why don't we go around from, Peter, why don't you start and we'll go around the table that direction.
All right, Peter Grimm, a governor representative, board member.
Stephen Waters from the Rome Sentinel and a Senate representative.
Ian McCallum, Commissioner's Designee for the Office of General Services.
Amy Ottaviano, the Budget Director's Designee.
Amanda, you're next.
Amanda DeSantis, Lieutenant Governor's Designee.
And in New York City in our conference room, we have
Franklin Stone, Assembly Designee.
Hi, good afternoon. Zoila Del Castillo, Deputy Secretary of State, and I'm here for the Department of State.
I believe we don't yet have anyone in Buffalo, so we have 7 of us here and we can begin. With me are members of my staff, Candace Watson, Kristen O'Neill, and our new member of staff, Miguel Bautista, who is our new Excelsior Service Fellow, beginning his 2-year rotation in that program. Here from Albany Law School and recent graduate. Got some other alum cheering. Comes to us from Maryland and takes over that spot vacated recently by Jake, who has moved on to his next role and did a lovely 2 years for us. And hopefully we'll get 2 or more years from Miguel. And so with that, I'm Shoshana, and I am going to call for a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which were circulated and are part of the packet.
Do that.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Terrific. With any discussion, does anyone want to discuss anything, or are we ready to vote on approving or not approving those minutes? Okay, does anyone object to the approval of those minutes? Terrific, hearing no objection, it looks like those minutes are approved and we will circulate them in final and replace the draft with the final version on our website. I'll do a quick update on statistics since we last met in mid-July. As far as our phone calls, we have from November through this September taken and responded to about 1,463 calls, representing 335 since we last spoke. Emails, we've responded to 2,015 since November of 2022, representing 456 since we last met. These are our informal advisory opinions containing legal advice to requesters by email. Total appeals between November and last month, 4,561 received and reviewed. Since last meeting, representing 1,264. Virtual and live presentations since November of 2022, 47 with participants, 5,520. Been 13 since our last meeting with participants of 515. Formal advisory opinions issued 25 since November, 2 formal opinions since we last met in July. And FOIL requests from between November and last month, 25, 2 since we last met. So those are statistics that I routinely update for you. And that brings us to discussion of possible topics for our annual report.
Wait a
which is
minute.
Go ahead, Franklin. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question, as I almost always do, about the virtual and in-person training. 47. How many are virtual and how many are in person? I asked this, I think, last month, but I don't know that I got an answer to that.
You did. I have to again look at my list.
Okay, I'd like actually to be specific, which I think I've been before, but I'm going to do it again. I'd like it broken down between virtual and in person, and then for virtual, I'm curious about, are they on demand? Are the people you're addressing all in a room, or are they doing it, from their individual computers? And I'm
not going to have that level of data. If one of our agents, if an entity requests a virtual program, I don't really necessarily know where they're attending from.
But it's live. It's not, you haven't put it in the can for somebody to download at home.
When we talk about doing a virtual program, we're talking about where I'm having a live interaction through video conferencing, WebEx, for example, with individuals who can hear me in real time
And ask
questions in real time.
What do you see? Do you see a room full of people, or do you see
I
individual
don't necessarily
faces?
see anything.
I'll tell you my concern. Pre-COVID, I thought the training at Coug was really one of the hallmarks of our service to our mission. My concern, and it's not just a Coug concern, we're all in a lot of Zoom meetings these days, and you all have said that the agencies and participants now prefer Zoom meetings to in-person meetings. But having participated in and watched people participate in a lot of Zoom meetings, particularly when they're, from your individual computer, one of the reasons you like them is you don't have to pay any attention to them, and you can do whatever else it is you want to do. And I think training is so important to us that's why at every meeting I ask about when we might increase our number of in-person meetings, and also ensure that we don't have people sitting at home, in their pajamas, playing bridge while they're ostensibly
I have two
watching.
things to offer, Franklin. I just first is
every
training that we offer are to people who want to be trained. So to the extent that they are wanting to goof off, they probably won't tune in. These are requests that we are responding to, going to conferences, and Kristen, I can attest from my approval of her travel vouchers, does a lot of live training, does them very frequently. Whenever anyone requests a live training, if it's possible for us to do it, given where it's being located, she does it and we do it. I do some, she does most. The virtual trainings are either available to anyone who wishes to participate on a monthly basis, or specifically in response to a request made by a body or a group of individuals who wish to be trained. So I don't have the same concern that people who are forced to go to a meeting that's on Zoom may be kind of tuning out, and I don't have that concern with the kinds of training that we do, because people want it and have requested it.
Well, you just had a category that said, and I'm paraphrasing, that the agency or the entity had requested training, which is what, at least the ones that I attended years ago, was true. And so everybody in the agency had to show up. If agency XYZ asks for a training session, are they requiring their employees to attend? I'm happy to have some assurances. My concern remains that while the numbers may or may not be up, I don't know, that the quality may not be the same as the training sessions that Kristen and
I don't
others
think you need to
were
worry
doing
about the
before.
quality. The quality is universally complimented.
I'm not talking about the quality of the presentation. I'm talking about the quality of the recipient. Having watched many people do their DEI training while they're, painting their nails. It's a concern for me about virtual training, and I'm happy to have the
I'm sorry.
assurances.
It's been a few years since I've participated in, on the director's behalf in a committee on open government meetings, so I'm sure I'm not totally up to speed on things the way I was, years ago. Are there like statutory requirements for training that we're, fulfilling in, or that there's a concern we are not meeting, or we are really truly responding to agency and entity asks for training. So in other words, we have no obligation but to provide, like as the committee, there's no obligation that you're falling short of, no statutory obligation or anything that you're falling short of. So the onus really is on the entities, which might be local governments, right? Not just state agencies we're talking about, presumably.
I would say to a large extent, it's local
local
governments and
governments.
local government organizations,
Right.
not state agencies.
That's the information I wanted to tease out of this, is not the number, but the where are we going?
It's included in every annual report.
Right,
You
but
can
it's
see it.
the detail of, is there a migration? Are there more local governments? We know we were missing some local governments.
I think the benefits of virtual is I'm first of all, it's a cost saving, especially when you're
Sure.
dealing with a
Absolutely.
small group.
Yeah.
Like for example, if a small group of maybe 10 or 12 people out in, somewhere up in the Canadian border or Buffalo want to meet with me and their preference is virtual, it makes a whole lot of sense
Yes.
for, me not to spend the
Right,
state's
but
money by traveling. So, but that's always their preference. It's whatever they're looking for. But I mean, let's just kind of give an example here. I mean, part of these are the virtual programs that I've been doing voluntarily since the beginning of COVID that I started. So, 5 or 6 times a year, I've been doing both Freedom of Information Law and Open Meetings Law information sessions. They're available
Yeah.
to anyone who would like to log on. The information gets sent out and distributed, and it gets posted on our website. Anyone that would like information about the Open Meetings Law or the Freedom of Information Law is welcome to attend these programs. And so that's my virtual option. So that's part of those numbers. Other virtual programs, another big number was, for example, the Department of State Division of Building Codes and Standards, and that was a big virtual number. They had 1,700 people that are required to do certain types of training. And can I guarantee they were all listening to me? No. But the other types of organizations that invite me to come talk to them, as I think Shoshana mentioned, these are people that they have a vested interest.
Yes.
They're not just taking this training just to check a box off on their resume. They have a vested interest in understanding how the Freedom of Information Law and the Open Meetings Law work. So if they're attending these programs, it's because they really want to learn.
And they
Like,
take
you know,
their
like-
duties responsibly.
I've got things like, for example, the City of Hudson, their staff asked me to come in and do a FOIL training. Village Park, I mean, there are all these different, I don't want to, go over each one, but the New York State Conference of Mayors, I've done several programs of them, and those are people, like you've got board members and village trustees and city council members and city clerks, those are people coming in and receiving this training. People that work for public library systems, when the new Commission on Ethics and
Lobbying.
when they were first became, I have COLIG here, and I'm like, COLIG. I'm like, what is?
I've done several trainings for
Yeah.
them. They're very interested because they're
Right, 'cause
newly
they're sort of
responsible
new
for both open
responsible.
meetings and FOIL.
New York State Association of Towns, New York State Town Clerks Association, and then even within the New York State Town Clerks Association, many counties have municipal clerks associations per county. And I've done numerous programs for those individual and a lot of those were in person, where I go and meet with a group of municipal clerks from a particular county, and we're doing FOIL and Open Meetings Law programs. So I think maybe that kind of gives you
That's
somewhat of
informative.
an
That's
idea of
That
the
helps.
types of programming we're doing, but to a large extent, the programming that I provide in response to requests, other than the ones that I mentioned, those 5 or 6 that I voluntarily provide to general public, those are people that have come to the Committee on Open Government because they have a vested interest in understanding their obligations under the Freedom of Information Law and the Open Meetings Law, and I get very good feedback from both the in-person and the virtual program, where they have an opportunity to ask questions.
And they do.
You know, we get the
Sometimes that's the
questions,
busiest part.
through the raise your hand feature, whether it's the chat feature, whatever the case is. It's not that I'm just speaking and no one has an opportunity to request clarification. You know, I have had good experience with the in-person training programs, or excuse me, both in-person and virtual training programs.
Okay. Let me pick up on one point Kristen just made, which is we respond to requests. And Steve's comment that local governments, and I'll go a little further and say one of the issues we're going to be discussing later is the rampant non-compliance with open government requirements. And non-compliance with existing law is a really big problem. Could we do more? Is there a mechanism for us to reach out to some of these local government groups that are apparently ignoring open meetings law and FOIL existing laws? Because
We
there
can't mandate
appears to
training.
be a gap. What?
We can't mandate training, but
Not on our
I'm not suggesting mandating,
no, but I mean,
I'm just
anytime that we,
suggesting.
people understand that that's an option that's available to them.
Well, I'm suggesting we might go a little further. It seems to me, I can't remember now, I think it was the Committee on Open Government actually had a list, not Committee on Open Government, the New York Coalition for Open Government and Reinvent Albany actually had, named names of entities that are just flat out not complying with open meetings law and FOIL. And I wondered if we could do some outreach to some of those entities.
So we
How will
generally
we have
don't
to
reach
do
out
it?
in hand slap, but we could potentially, and we could talk about that, but one of the proposals that's in this packet of proposals that I think we received from the coalition was a suggestion that training, that open government training be mandated. And I want to point out, Franklin, that falls directly into the trap that you earlier identified as a problem, which is that if you mandate something, they're going to be in their pajamas drinking wine, maybe.
Or you
So
go
I guess
in person.
Well,
Or
you
go,
could.
or they're meeting, or they meet in person regardless of
So I
where
would point out to
Kristen
you
is.
that if they mandate in-person training across the state, then we're going to need a bigger boat.
I'm talking about them being in person as opposed to Kristen being in person, just because I think you have a higher
You
attention
mean
rate
like with a
that.
babysitter
But I
observing
was
and
not-
reporting?
Well,
to what-
I mean,
what
the
they're
meetings
doing?
that I attended years ago, everyone was in a group, and you could have, as I've attended many times, have a speaker that's not remote. I wasn't suggesting a hand slap. I was suggesting perhaps greater PR to some of these local entities that are not complying. So that we broadened the outreach we were doing to make it known that there are rules and that we can help them on that, as opposed to a hand slap. That was my suggestion, because we've got a rampant problem of non-compliance, particularly among the local entities. And it seems to me, since we provide training, that's something where we might fill a need. We can discuss it further when we get to points on the annual meeting report, but I thought it just belonged here.
Is there a centralized, and again, this is me getting caught back up to speed after many years, how do we identify, is there some kind of central tracking of, the entity, the local governments that were struggling with compliance? Do we have that universe identified, or is there a way that we can identify?
So there are a couple ways that's been done. One is, I think, the Coalition for Open Government, that group in Buffalo, they've identified an anecdotal list based on their, I don't know what their sample, I don't know how they chose their sample, but they went out and did that and created a list of evildoers.
So it
And
exists
so
out there.
that list, it's just, I don't know how that
How
that list
come
was
out,
created, but there is a list
What
of
the logic
examples of
behind
people
it is.
of groups that have struggled in their view to comply. There's that, but there's also when we receive information from people struggling with their government bodies, whether it's FOIL agencies or open meeting law public bodies, and when they have questions about whether something that body or agency has done, we oftentimes will, in answering their question, will reach out to the entity or
That's what I.
agency and say, look, could you please provide us more information so that we can learn about so we can have all the information we need to respond to this person who's got an issue. And in that way, that's sort of a subtle reference. And again, when we review appeals, FOIL appeals, which is something that come in by the thousands, if we see something that we believe clearly demonstrates that there's a misunderstanding, we will not hesitate to
You're proactively.
reach out. Well, I think, I mean, that is a bit reactive,
Yeah,
but
right,
but
but
we,
if you're.
We don't wait for somebody to request an
Exactly.
advisory.
You
Yeah.
see an
So-
issue,
So our job is to
I
be
think that's
informative
important, yeah,
and be helpful.
yeah.
true, and I think that is, I mean, I think that, you know, to Amy's point earlier, I think that we are fully discharging that remit. The question of whether we can have the resources to do more and identify more proactively, search out and try to remedy proactively or offer proactively advice where we haven't been asked necessarily for it to deal with it. You know, it's an open question. We are a small group of folks. Each of us has a plate of before us that we are consuming and hopefully being able to keep up with. We could, you know, talk about how we might incorporate a project to do more. This summer, as you all know, because I mentioned it in July, we had an intern who was with us from college, a summer break type of intern who went and collected proactively a lot of points of data for us that will form the basis of a special report due to the governor and the legislature this end of this year that will make a part of the annual report. We could think of, you know, do something else similar to that and reach out and ask if people are interested in training. We could try a method like that to see if that drums up additional response. Once you ask though, you have to provide, and we are limited in how much training we can provide by the hours in the day and the other things that are on our plate, especially if someone, Franklin, requests a live training far away, we would then have to make it reasonable for us to go and do those things, and it might create maybe a slight delay in having to fulfill that request. But certainly providing education and training has always been an extremely high priority, long before I got to the committee and since I got here. And in fact, since I got here and since COVID complicated things a little bit by way of meeting other people initially, well, we put together what I thought was a pretty robust way of responding to that by offering the opportunity to continue to be trained to do the work that is required of government without having to be in the same room. And it has proven very popular. And the legislature, when it held its hearing on virtual meetings in October of 2021, learned largely that people very much like the ability to do this work, be trained, do a meeting remotely, whether they're remotely gathered like we are here where we're kind of communicating from public locations, or whether they're at their home and being able to discharge their obligations in an environment that allows them to, you know, do other things and save time. So I think that a lot of the feedback on virtual presence has been very positive. I understand, Franklin, your feedback that it presents troubles and issues but I don't know if we'll be able to solve for that by offering more live trainings, because I don't know if we have the resources to do too many more live ones. I think that, you know, Kristen's out of the office doing live trainings, you know, a good percentage of the time. I think we calculated, and maybe it's a quarter of her time, getting there and back and doing the trainings that are offered. So to do more would require potentially more staff to do that. Whereas she can train a whole lot more people from her office if they desire to be trained in that way.
So I have, the audience that we train, is it mostly internal? Is it mostly state agency requests?
Local governments.
And local governments?
I would say, yeah, I mean, a small percentage is state agency, a larger percent is people that work for local governments.
And do we have many from, like community action organizations like League of Women Voters, Justice Centers, things like that people?
Not as many. I would say the large percentage is local government, or either
Yeah.
individual local governments or organizations that represent local governments like NICOM, Association of Towns, Association of Counties, New York State Town Clerks Association.
Mayors. I think
But in a general sense.
the people who want and need this training are the people who are responsible to discharge obligations under FOIL and the open meetings law.
No, I understand, but it could also be very good for, I
Yes.
mean, the reach out could be very good for those that are looking for information that, as an organization, it would be nice to have all of their members to at least know about it too. Another question, is it a PowerPoint kind of presentation? I see the materials are pretty much, could we now put together just a webinar that is set up for people
We have a
to,
YouTube page that's full of my recordings.
so just taking that.
If people just want to go back and view one of my recordings, it's always known that the programs are being recorded and that they're available on my training site.
Great,
They're linked and people ask for them
right.
from time to time to.
So we have the materials there, it's just we don't have the vehicle to do kind of a reach out, a more general reach out.
I think it would require a project to go and figure out
I agree with you.
the list and reach out. I do think that we might be opening a little bit of a Pandora's box if we
understand that
reached
too.
out and, but I do also think that a lot of folks that received a call, like, do you want training, might say, yes, can it be virtual? And then we might be able to fulfill that right away. But for live training, we would, be scheduling and doing them as we could. I think, before I got.
I'm not saying for either live or virtual, I'm just
Yeah.
getting information.
Yeah, I think that,
How
we
it goes.
could, there are certain entities that have been identified, at least anecdotally, as being not so great at complying with the law that, potentially we could reach out to and say, hey, we saw your name in a list of bad people. Would you like to be trained? We could do that. And then there are other, we do reach out to a lot of the, and a lot of the larger organizations responsible for these obligations do annually reach out and get trained, and that list grows. There's always another group that might benefit from this, and if we learn of them and they are interested and desire it, we'll always respond and say, yes, we'll do it.
Great, thanks.
Can we move on to the first bullet under the annual report was an update on the legislative proposals, and I know that as late as even this morning, we got another piece of information from Tom Speaker. Happy to report that all 5 of his hot list there were, covered in our list as well, and Kristen will run us through the legislative proposals on our list, knowing that the Tom Speaker's list is subsumed within our list, and we can just talk about those pieces of pending legislation. And what we'll do with any discussion that arises from each one is we'll try to synthesize. The object for today is for me and for my staff to understand and try to synthesize the comments and the information that we've got to, and then we'll respond to this meeting with a draft report that everyone can react to, and we can hone and get everyone's thoughts on, and then hopefully have something that we can address together at a meeting, when we're ready to finalize the report. So with that in mind, you want to run through, Kristen, the legislative proposals? Great.
So generally, in terms of open government enforcement as a whole, as opposed to FOIL enforcement and open meetings law enforcement, There's Assembly Bill 7953. And just in terms of taking notes, in the agenda packet, there's a list of the bills. I just want to kind of give a quick overview of what each one sort of addresses. So this is 7933, amending the open meetings law to create a new Article 9 that would contain enforcement provisions for both FOIL and the open meetings law. It would direct the courts to establish a FOIL and open meetings law review program within the court system where individuals can file a petition for a review of open government claims. This has been referred to committee, no further action. Senate Bill 2865 expands the powers and duties of the Committee on Open Government to establish a process to receive notices of appeals from any aggrieved party relating to both FOIL and open meetings law, and it grants investigative authority to the committee and the ability to impose civil penalties for violations. Again, this bill's been referred to committee. In terms of FOIL enforcement, Senate Bill 3438 would assign the appeal process. Instead of having appeal officers within each agency, the Committee on Open Government would have to hear all appeals. This would be a big one in terms of staffing. So the committee would assign appeal officers to review all appeals of decisions by agency, again, removing the appeal process from the agency level. And if necessary, we would have to hold hearings. And establish an informal mediation program to resolve disputes.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Do any of these, as you're going through, obviously they're gonna have a price tag, do any of them address the budgetary needs, then allow you to hire the staff and the tools and resources you would need if they made these changes?
No, we're an interesting creature. This committee is an interesting creature. It's a statutory creature that is identified only in essentially section 89 of the law, of the public officers law, and it says that there should be a committee of 11 members. It doesn't identify us, me, and my staff. It says that the Secretary of State, that the Department of State shall be the Secretariat, and identifies that by any method that entity wishes, it shall provide support to the 11-member committee. So this would involve potentially, unless the committee were re-identified and established as its own agency, instead of a creature agency, its own kind of agency, more along the lines of the COLIG, I guess. Interesting example given the drama now, but that's sort of how we've been compared before, and in some of the materials from Mr. Speaker's, the Reinvent Albany, there was a proposal that we be treated like maybe the authority's budget office, or unless that change were to be made, we don't even have a budget.
Right.
We are, so our budget
The department, that the agency that is hosting you essentially would be responsible.
would absorb that and those responsibilities. Sure. And so I don't think, because of just how we've been created, any of these bills have ever addressed the how,
right,
the fiscal. But in responding to bills that make it to the point where this agency would have to respond to them, any response has always included a query about the fiscal, and a note about the impact. And we are obviously prepared whenever these bills come across my desk and I look at them, I start thinking about the fiscal, right, and how we might be able to discharge this obligation and what the staffing costs and
right,
logistics. But yes, none of them contemplate.
Well, that's where my brain went immediately. Yep. Separate and apart from whatever anyone's opinion may or may not be on the merits of the legislation, it's how.
I think that somebody's brain will have identified that we are a tiny, I mean, what you see is what we have. We have, one member not here today, but that's it. As far as my staff, that any significant increase in responsibility or authority will translate into the need to add.
The proposals deal with intent, not the consequence.
I think that's true, yeah.
Let's see, we have another Assembly Bill, 5707, that I believe was supported by the Coalition on Open Government, is my note here, that would, again, remove the appeal process from the agency level and empower the Committee on Open Government to hear appeals. I think I'll just generally say, unless otherwise noted, these bills have really not made it out of committee. Senate Bill 1641 amends the amount of amends the law, the Freedom of Information law, to address how long an agency has to respond to FOIL requests. It also, let's see, it talks about how long they have to respond. If they don't respond, there's all these different procedures. It's a very sort of detailed bill. And it proposes an amendment to the penal law to criminalize as a Class B misdemeanor a failure to comply with FOIL. That's sort of, I guess, the big takeaway from 1641. And
But finding anyone willing to apply or accept FOIL jobs if you're criminalizing the, right?
Yeah, it's where it's a failure to comply where the governor, any senior appointed staff member of the governor or the head of a state agency has a duty to review a request for records. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this bill is maybe set up as sort of the code version of the common law version of a bill we'll talk about, identify a little bit later, which is the more general clarification bill that we've been supporting in our report for a couple of years, which we used to call technical amendments that would more clarify the time limits. This bill, chapter and verse, these are the dates, these are the times, this is the penalty, down to the, yes, micron. And then the other bill is the more clarifying bill that we have in the past thought makes a lot of sense and have said, we support, this. So I think that bill is also in this list, and I think it was on Reinvent Albany's list as well that we got this morning. Not this one, but the other one.
In terms of attorney's fees, Senate Bill 5801, which is supported by both the Coalition on Open Government and Reinvent Albany, would mandate attorney's fees for all successful petitioners. I think, regardless. Right now, it's mandatory if the petitioner substantially prevails and there is no reasonable basis for denial of access for FOIL. It's discretionary if it's the petitioner substantially prevails and there's a time limit issue. Now it would just be mandatory for all successful petitioners for both FOIL and the Open Meetings Law.
I think it just takes out the word substantially. I think it just says prevails
and
other
also
language.
For Open Meetings Law, it's discretionary. Senate Bill 5174. Sorry, I think it amends Open Meetings Law to make permissive the assessment of fees and attorneys' fees upon wrongful denial of access to records under FOIL when either the person has substantially prevailed or the agency failed to respond within the time frame. So the difference there would be if someone wanted to challenge a constructive denial of access, they could still get attorney's fees even if ultimately the decision is that the records that they were requesting were not available under FOIL simply because the agency dragged it out for so long in terms of if they did not respond to the request within the time limit set forth in statute, the petitioner could still get attorney's fees. In terms of, there's a couple of, I think actually we just have one significant legislative proposal relating to the repeal of Civil Rights Law 50A, and that's Senate Bill 2322, which makes a couple of amendments to clarify the scope of the 50A repeal. Bill states that the law enforcement agencies the bill memo, I think, cannot continue to withhold these records beyond the narrow categories defined in earlier repeal legislation, and will provide courts with unambiguous declaration of the legislature's intent with respect to records. It clarifies that an agency cannot deny, sorry, I'm trying to like read through and skip, shall not deny access to records on the grounds that disclosure would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy when the records relate to complaints, allegations, or charges that have not yet been determined, did not result in disciplinary action, or resulted in the disposition or finding other than substantiated or guilty.
So this is what, so right after the 50-day repeal, the first two advisory opinions that this body issued had to do with the two issues that are clarified by this legislation, proposed legislation. The first was the issue of unsubstantiated reports and whether they were protected by 87(2)(b), which is an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy in the event that the allegation of wrongdoing was never substantiated or was unfounded. And we identified that historically, the privacy exemption did apply to this kind of allegation in other contexts. So without clarification from the legislature, this would appear to apply here because it wasn't like the repeal of 50A was designed to make something, it didn't seem clear that it was designed to make these reports more available than other types of reports. But this legislation clarifies that and says an unsubstantiated allegation of wrongdoing is not, as a matter of law, an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy if disclosed. I think that's what this legislation clarifies. And then the other thing that we were immediately asked to opine on that hadn't been clarified by the legislature was the issue of retroactivity. And in other words, reports that were generated before June of 2020, were they all now available going forward? And some argued that the law wasn't retroactive and couldn't apply to reports of allegations of wrongdoing that accrued in May of 2020 and before. And I think we issued an opinion early that said that's just contrary to the rules of construction, and I think it does apply absent a declaration that it somehow should not apply retroactively. And one or two courts said they agree and one court said they didn't agree. And so the legislature is like, we last year identified that this was a problem in our report. And I guess over the several sessions, enough people have identified this as an issue that they have now, in this proposed legislation, clarified that the law does apply retroactively to reports of and allegations of wrongdoing that accrued before June of 2020. So that would be my two takeaways from this legislation. And we, I guess, consistent with what we as a body have said over the last couple of years, we've been asking for clarifications. These are those clarifications.
Senate Bill 1726 is a proposal that we have recommended in our report for several years now, clarifying the time limits that apply to responses. The one that Shashank mentioned earlier in terms of just providing, codifying it in statute with the opinions that we've offered as the Committee on Open Government in terms of how long an agency has to respond to a request. That proposal, I believe, is one of the ones that is supported by the Reinvent Albany. Senate Bill 1641 takes a different approach. Their bill would require that an agency grants or deny a request within 30 days, and if granted, produce the request within records within 90 days. Another Senate Bill 5322 would require an agency to grant or deny a request within 25 days from receipt and produce records within 40 days from receipt. None of these have made it out of committee yet. Another recommendation is Senate Bill 3502 that would amend FOIL to exclude records prepared by an outside consultant at the behest of an agency from the intra or interagency exception to rights of access. Currently, consultant reports are pursuant to judicial precedent and Court of Appeals decision, consultant reports can be considered intra or interagency material and can be withheld pursuant to that provision. This amendment is supported by Reinvent Albany. Let's see, proposed amendments to the open meetings law to require local governments to live stream their open meetings. There's a couple here. Senate Bill 4475 would apply to all public bodies. Senate Bill 4476 would apply just to local governments. There is a proposal that relates to the definition of agency and public body, and that's Senate Bill 3406. To expand the definition to include entities that are created by an agency or that are governed by a board of directors or similar body, of a majority of which is designated by one or more state or local government officials. This bill has passed the Senate, was delivered to Assembly, and has been referred to committee. Senate Bill 2451, no same as, would amend New York State not-for-profit corporations law to subject certain not-for-profit corporations to both FOIL and the Open Meetings Law. Has passed the Senate, delivered to Assembly, and referred to committee. Senate Bill 2727 amends public authorities law to clarify that all state and local authorities, as well as all subsidiaries and affiliates of those state and local authorities, must be subject to FOIL and the Open Meetings Law. Has passed Senate, delivered to Assembly, and referred to committee. There's a section that relates to trade secret exceptions, Senate Bill 3257, which is supported by reInvent Albany, that would require entities that submit records to state agencies that are accepted from disclosure under FOIL, the FOIL trade secret exception, to periodically reapply for the exception. Has passed the Senate, delivered to Assembly, and referred to committee. One more, I promise. Proactive disclosure, Senate Bill 623 authorizes and directs the committee to study proactive disclosure as a means of increasing transparency and access to government information. Passed Senate, delivered to Assembly, and referred to committee.
So what I propose that we'll do as a sort of synthesis of these bills, because I know that in the last meeting there was a general agreement that the committee ought to comment on, take a position on, one way or another, pending or proposed legislation that we weren't really sure what the threshold was, that had gotten someplace, that had moved forward, that seemed likely. But so we've identified, Kristen and my staff have identified these bills, and 5 of them have been, at least 5, and I think the coalition has done at least 5 of this list as well to us that they specifically support. I would propose that we identify a position with respect to each of these bills that we've reviewed with here today during this meeting, and then we'll propose something to the members, and you guys can react to that and decide whether that's something that the majority of you feel comfortable with, and we can move forward that way. Alternatively, or even in addition to that, if there's a particular one of these that we want to discuss right now and hash out, let's, can do that too. But we're happy to prepare a draft addressing each of these, if that's preferable, if that seems like where we are in the thinking right now.
Could you go through the list of 5 again that would be?
The ones that we got this morning?
Or the ones that would be, is it those same 5 that you would be doing under the first option, that you would be doing?
No, we'll do them all.
Okay.
We'll create a position on each of these
Okay.
of support or
Okay.
study, or don't think this is a great idea, or think it needs more thought, or with respect to all of these that we just ran through. Again, some of them conflict with each other a little bit, so it'll, if we support, one, we might have to say that this other one doesn't ring the right bells, or may go too far in a particular direction, or, needs some fine tuning. And some of them are duplicative of each other in that they recommend 45 days or 90 days or 60 days, or, so we can deal with them kind of as a group, and say yay, nay, maybe, or whatever we're gonna say. I just thought it might be helpful to run through these with everyone now, and if anyone sticks out in anyone's mind as want to discuss it now, let's do it, that's great. And if on the other hand, you want us to take a crack at crafting something, we can do that too. Yes, Franklin?
I like the idea of your going through them all. I think that's great. in terms of how it looks in our annual report, I do think having a narrative where we discuss, and I'm just throwing this out as an example, where we discuss the problems with noncompliance and what are the potential remedies for noncompliance with existing legislation. You know, and one thing would be attorney's fees, and then you could say, and these are the 3 different proposals of how to deal with it. I don't know whether we need to take a position on the particular ones, but also fit these proposals in to a substantive discussion of what needs to happen to New York open government laws. I mean, another thing is to clarify. Another thing is to shorten the time frame. I mean, I just think in addition to the work you're doing, we need to think about how it would fit within a narrative for our report, because that's what we usually do, and I think that's easier for people to read and to understand the reason that we and other groups are proposing legislation.
Sure.
Just to double check, this is not something we've historically done, correct?
We have.
Okay.
We've just, I think that the proposal that came up at the last meeting, and maybe I'm misremembering it and so other people can correct me, but that there was a desire that there was a
Take responsibility for anything.
there was a desire that we and I actually think that, you know, I mean, I think I remember, you know, David and Franklin also saying that we ought to be clear, if we can be, about bills that the committee as a group supports, and you know, to the extent that they exist, don't support, think have problems, or you know, it's obviously there are 2 ways to deal with it, and I think Franklin identified both ways, and I think that this is historically what we've done, which is we deal with these proposals in a legislative updates section, and this one just might be longer than normal, and then we deal with them and I reference them in sections that address particular issues on the minds of the members of the committee. For example, I'm sure that when we go through and talk about and reprise and update areas that we've discussed in the past, we'll talk about them with respect to new proposed legislation that would address the issue and discuss it there. On 50A, on clarifying timelines, but we do the same thing that we've done historically. I think what the proposal was last time was that we not miss anything in the legislative proposals section. And I don't think anyone suggested that we did miss something, but that to the extent that there may be a bumper crop, we ought to take positions where we can.
Okay, sure. I just didn't remember, narrowing it down to the committee is in favor of this bill or is against this bill when we did this last year.
So we did take a position on many and not all. And
Okay.
I think there was a suggestion that we should take a position on everything that was forward.
Got it.
And the question of what is considered forward was not one that was fully resolved, because most of the stuff that we get that's pending or that's proposed is pretty not forward, right? It's languishing in it's a one House bill in committee.
Right.
And so how we identify it may just be how important we think the issue is, and that may be in the past how it was done.
Okay.
But I think, we'll take a crack at taking a position on these, and
Great.
if it doesn't look like it makes any sense to do that, we'll just cross it out.
And even if we don't take positions on certain ones, it feels like at least identifying, sort of the pros and the cons for the legislature to be able to take their own position is still.
That's what we've historically
Right,
done where we
yeah.
haven't come to a bottom line.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's up to them at the end of the day.
Yep, and I think
access to
that's been
information
that's been the
in the
goal.
state. Yeah.
That's been the goal, but we'll do both things. We will put together this as a section, and we will, to the extent that we are, as a body, that you're addressing particular issues of concern, weave in those proposals where appropriate, so that they may be referenced twice in the report, and that's okay. Referenced in the legislative updates section and or the proposals section, and we normally would weave the proposals into the substantive areas anyway. That's how it's been done in the past, and we can do it both ways and see if it makes sense to everyone.
We are so small an organization, a committee, that the most significant thing that we can bring to all of these issues is clarity. That these are enforcement or open government or attorney's fees or something like that. But I thought that what Franklin did was say, let's see the philosophy, if we can tease out of the philosophy that there is a problem of non-compliance that needs to be addressed. We do have funding challenges. We have transparency is yet another issue. And those are the specific topics that we can be very clear about. And then the detail gets into what you're talking about, which are the specific proposals. If we can bring some clarity to this, my goodness, what a benefit.
I think we've done that on a level, but
It
was our priority before.
Yes.
We gave the narrative after certain things priority, but it kind of dwindled out towards the end of our annual report in the past. And I think Franklin's saying now we should do it with everything.
But I think that the philosophy is critical, and the bill support or non-support is important, but fits underneath that.
No, I understand that, but I think what we're saying now is we do it on everything. Sure. I think before we just kind of had a priority list about.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I see.
Well, we'll give it a whirl, and we'll see how it's received amongst you guys, and if we find by reviewing that it has identified a different path, then we'll follow it. Hopefully, all of us are following the middle path anyway, so we'll do that. Where am I? Okay.
I'm not sure where you're going next, so this may be preempting you, but one of the things that reInvent Albany suggested, and Lord knows I'm about halfway through their PowerPoint, was that we in our report do an honest assessment of overall transparency efforts, state and local implementation, what is known and what should be known. And then on the next page, they expand on that by saying, COOG should be asking why there is such a huge difference between what's included in the COOG annual report and the vastly more critical assessment of government transparency that can be seen on editorial pages statewide and in well-documented watchdog reports. COOG should rise above politics to candidly report on the widespread dysfunction and flaunting of transparency laws and the state's official transparency philosophy. I'm not suggesting we have to use the words that are there, but I do think that there seemed to be a growing disconnect between, I think our introduction should go back to being a little more alarmist about the state of overall open government in New York State. And then other things flow from that. What are the particular problems we have? What are the solutions? Some are training, some are greater attorney's fees, some is new legislation. But I happen to agree with reInvent Albany's assessment. Maybe it's because I read the newspapers, read newspapers every day, and I keep seeing, quite alarmist declarations and facts about open government, and I think our report has been a little mild on that.
So I think there's definitely room for and a role for that, but I just question statutorily whether it's our role. But I'm just here to advise on what the law says we should be doing. And the tone and everything obviously will come from the members. The statute does not give the Committee on Open Government the same kind of role as watchdog groups and public interest groups and good government groups. It's different. And so I think the role that we can definitely with all confidence have statutory authority to do is to point out where the laws can be made better to solve problems that we see arising. And, that is fair game. And how we do that is up to you guys. We can take a crack at it and, it'll be up to the members to decide how it wants to discharge that statutory authority that has been given to you.
I don't disagree at all with what Franklin said, but that is a question of political science, philosophy, language, and everything that my business has failed for 50 years, that the news business fails to focus on. It is absolutely true, absolutely correct, but not it's too easy to degenerate into noise when we're really interested in being very pragmatic at this level. And I think that being very specific, which is what you were talking about, Shoshana, is how do we negotiate between the abstract and the very real to be constructive?
Well, my proposal was to fit it squarely within what Shoshana just said, which is identifying problems. If that's our mandate, is to identify problems and to give advice, I think that there are a lot of problems, and the good government groups are identifying them for us. Yes, our role is different, but having been informed of facts that are very troubling problems, I don't think we should just jump to, a review of the legislation without a preface that says there are a lot of problems and here's what the problems are. And here are the proposed solutions to it. Some we agree with, some we don't agree with. Some would require us to do things that we aren't equipped to do. I mean, whatever. But I think we would be remiss in not having a strong statement of what the current problems are. Because if we don't, and we haven't of late, we are really out of touch with what people who are on the front lines are seeing.
Don't you find it curious that you haven't included journalism in your good government groups?
We have a deficiency in the number of good government representatives on this committee that we're journalist representatives on this group, or I would include it more. Actually, we'll get to that in a minute, because I think the COOG mission role, capacity funding, and the like is something that we ought to look at. Absolutely, journalists should have an opinion, and they've been publishing on this.
Kristen and Shoshana, have you seen, just when you mentioned before, there's thousands of appeals and things that you get each year. Have you seen any trends through those appeals that might be informative as to where there are particular problem areas or subjects that could help maybe inform? That way we've got our own sort of firsthand, we're relying on facts that are coming directly to us.
Correct. That's the point that I was going to make, maybe. So thank you for making it. The trends that we have seen, we have definitely reported on to this group, and those are delays, which we have for a long time. I would say maybe 70%, maybe plus, have to do our complaints about how long it takes for FOIL. And then a larger percentage have to do with law enforcement we get a certain bolus of countable bolus of complaints having to do with responses of law enforcement agencies to requests for material that is now no longer statutorily exempt and is now subject to disclosure pursuant to traditional rights of review access. And we have sought the need for those clarifications to better advise people, and presumably the legislature has identified and has agreed that those two areas need clarification, and so we can talk about how that answers the question anyway. Whether everyone agrees with how they're answering it, I don't know, but that answers those two questions that we've had. And then on the open meetings side, the biggest trends that I've seen, and I'll let Kristen remark as well, is that have to do with improperly having an executive session, or not holding making a notice that you're going to have an executive session, for example, and not have an open session also, so that there's just a misunderstanding of the fact that you have to, if you're going to have an executive session, it has to be inside the open session, and and then posting minutes, taking minutes, and allowing people to be anonymous when they make a public comment or make a public comment. There are themes that we see on those, and some of the proposed bills and some of the stuff that the Coalition on Open Government has sent to us address those open meetings law concerns that we can identify and talk about. Kristen, what am I missing on either side of that?
No, that was a good summary. As I mentioned, what time limits is the unnecessary delays, or I shouldn't say unnecessary delays. Sometimes I do understand that it's a staffing issue, but of course that needs to be addressed. And when you have agencies that are dealing with significantly large volumes of requests, and it's taking them 6 months to respond to a request for a single document that should be readily available and clearly public, at least to the person who's asking for it. The delays can be incredibly frustrating to the person who's seeking the record. So I think it's that's got to be the number one issue with FOIL. Executive session is an excellent example. Proper notice of meetings, making sure that the notice is getting posted, for example, on the on the public body's website. The minutes, the record scheduled to be discussed. That's where my mind goes.
Yep, that's a good
so
one.
There's been a provision in place since 2012 that requires records scheduled to be discussed during an open meeting be available
to the extent practicable.
To the extent practical, up until 2020, up until 2021, it just said prior to or at the meeting. In 2021, the open meetings law was amended to require that it be made available at least 24 hours prior. My experience is when open meetings law was amended in 21.
That's when people first learned.
That's when people first learned about an obligation that had been in effect since 2012. But anyway, point being is I see that as a big issue. Hopefully it's an education issue. It's something I'm really trying to push when I'm doing my trainings, reminding people of this obligation. But
so again, these issues of non-compliance, when listed discreetly like this, can seem, easily resolvable. I do understand that if there are hundreds of municipalities or public bodies that are routinely missing these requirements, it can seem like an epidemic. And it's an epidemic, but that I think that the law as it exists sort of already requires these things to happen. So making the change that one might make is that you have to stop being an ostrich and understand that you're not doing it right. The issue with time limits is different, and that's why year after year this body has said, we support legislation that would clarify and make more understandable for agencies and requesters FOIL time limits for response. On the open meetings law side, which is a lot of the stuff that with the exception of live streaming, which we can talk about as a separate issue, a lot of the stuff that's been pointed out to us by good government groups is that law already requires these things and just they're not being done. So how we propose that the law be changed is a more complicated question. There's not an easy fix for people not knowing, like ignorance is no defense. Well, it's true. The problem is that here, there's really no teeth in the law.
And that's a big complaint we hear.
So if there's no teeth and there's no real meaningful enforcement mechanism for the average person on the street, which I think is overwhelming for someone who is spent their whole life trying not to file a lawsuit, maybe, just wants their school board to post the minutes or whatever it is, that making a proposal that there be some enhanced penalties may serve to incentivize some public bodies to comply, but it also may incentivize some members of public bodies to no longer serve. So I guess it's a difficult question. It's maybe as Stephen would say, a philosophical question. But I don't know if changing the provisions of the law is going to make a big difference because they already exist.
Excuse me for never having been involved in government in any form and quite happily having done that. I am not aware of what software is available. I'm a former computer jock from 50 years ago. So I understand what software can do, whether it's a database manager or things like that. But I am not sure what coordinated software there is that is affordable and available and general purpose enough to be able to address a myriad of the kinds of problems. And do we have 150 solutions trying to be made to do something that if it were a concerted, uniform software availability, a tool availability, would that help?
Are you talking about like for live streaming or web hosting?
Whether it's live streaming or web, or whether it's records management.
I mean, so what we have in New York is 6,600 separate sovereigns.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Even amongst state executive agencies,
Yeah.
where we have an identified universe and a consolidated agency that is designed to support from a technology perspective those agencies, you don't get agreement about what package is right for each of those. So setting aside the question of whether anyone could mandate on all of those separate sovereigns the same solution, I think
Yeah.
even availability, I think gives so many different levels of
I'm
abilities to fund
not
that.
talking mandates, I'm talking functionality. In other words, Microsoft Word or Excel or so forth are generally adopted simply because they're inexpensive and reasonably easy. And I don't know whether there has been a concerted to say, what are the characteristics of a tool that would make local governments comply more easily?
I mean, I think that the tool is only as good as the person operating the tool, Stephen, so I
Okay.
think that
Well,
even if there were a perfect tool out there, I think you'd
And
get
it's something-
6,600 different ways of
It's so
operating
easy for
it.
me to pontificate for my ignorance.
As somebody who goes to like NICOM and
Uh-huh.
Association of Towns and these types of programs, there's vendors.
Yes,
And they're out there selling their programs. There are tools available. There are certainly tools available to these municipalities to make their lives easier. It's just a matter of finding the tool that's affordable for them and fits their needs. But there are, I'll go to these programs. I went to NICOM up in Lake Placid last week. Tables set up everywhere, and a good number of them are just about vendors providing this type of service, like about records management and website, and there's stuff out there. It's just a matter of the municipalities working with these organizations that are out there to help them to find the one that fits best for them.
thank you.
So perhaps without delving deeply, we covered a bunch of topics, in last year's report. What I proposed that my staff and I do would be to discuss them in light of developments over the year, see if we need to continue to focus on them, either expand them or shrink them as necessary, and propose them again for your all consideration in the draft that I'm gonna circulate. Unless, I think that, again, using Franklin's sort of idea as a leaping off point, when we discuss 50A in this year's report, we can discuss it in the light of the proposed legislation that would clarify the two issues that we've been identifying as problem areas, because these are in fact the two issues we've been identifying as problem areas. Now we have a piece of proposed legislation that would resolve them one way or another. So we can talk about it, take a position on whether we like it or don't like the resolution, and then move on to the next topic. So using that as a guide, I think we'll attack each section in that way if we can. And I tell you if we can't, and make a note about why it either hasn't changed or has disappeared or is an addendum now or whatever it is, and we'll work on that. And then we can talk about, I know that that we got a lot of topics from the two presentations that we had at our last meeting together, and I recirculated those materials to everybody and I posted them as documents scheduled to be discussed during this meeting, and so they've been a part of the agenda packet since that was posted. And I guess I open it up now if everyone's wanting to talk about anything from those packages that you would like to see discussed or a section devoted to a draft of in what I send you next.
Once again, sorry. Both, well, the New York Coalition for Open Government, I don't have any page numbers on this, so I can't tell you, but it's about halfway through, and it says require state agencies to track FOIL requests, and it's asking, I guess, for legislation or just action from the government, following up on the memo that she issued last year requiring 70 state agencies to prepare a transparency plan. They recommend that be coupled with an annual report about the number of FOIL requests, appeals, average time, modeled on the Department of Justice federal government plan that would it says it would allow us to see how well FOIL is working and where changes need to occur. That sort of dovetails with what reInvent Albany has suggested, which is needed analysis and data collection, so that we have a sense of the volume of requests and software. So,
A section on that, Franklin?
a section on that. I've
Yep.
kind of blathered.
I think
a
we
little
even
bit
touched
here.
on it in last year's report, so we'll make it a bigger section and talk about I think data collection is sort of an important concept that we have talked about sort of before, and
Yeah.
we can emphasize the areas of concern that we know about with respect
Yeah, and
to
it
what we
has-
can do with that.
And it ties in with proactive disclosure, because right now the good government groups and journalists have been foiling agencies to get information about FOIL requests, and this just seems to be a more efficient way to achieve that goal.
Yeah, I think that's how we tied it in last year, Franklin, so we can
Yeah.
rejigger that section to focus on that. Anyone else wanna call out anything specific from these to make a section by itself?
I did send you an email last night about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I thought that was focused, maybe I misread it. I thought that you were reacting to something that David had written.
Well, only because he happened to address AI, and the more I ran into a United States District Court, the Southern District of New York, instance where these lawyers used ChatGPT in order to do the initial prep work?
Yeah, I've read a lot of articles about that. I find them very humorous.
I don't. I find it very frightening.
Well, you know, where people are writing briefs and seeing whether judges can figure it out. And, like the hand that
But
has
it's
6
the-
fingers in your profile photo.
But it's the citations that are fictional.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I am, well, there's a question of algorithms and the questions of artificial intelligence are basically the same.
Okay, I think that I think we definitely have a proposal
Okay,
that
fine.
from David, and we can
Fine.
add,
Then-
you know, we can.
Then don't add me, just.
No, we'll add, like I said, to the extent that you want a larger discussion of AI, react to it. Yeah, we'll do, but, you know, what I would propose is that to the extent that there isn't an additional, group of thoughts that we can extract based on David's proposed piece, that we include David's
Okay.
piece
Okay.
in the draft that we circulate,
Yep.
so that everyone can, to the extent they haven't already, I don't know, I have not received any like line by line reactions to David's piece yet, but I anticipate getting that. But to the extent I don't before I circulate
Sure.
the draft, I would propose that I put it in, and, you know, weave it in, and then it can be reacted to and expanded on, or whatever needs to happen to it in the next round. That gives David an opportunity, since he couldn't be here with us today, to further, you know, talk about that concept and how it might weave into other areas that we're going to be talking about. So unless anybody has another thought about that, go ahead, Franklin.
No, not on that.
Not on that, okay. All right. Did you have another topic you wanted a section on, Franklin?
I did.
Yeah.
And this is a little touchy, since most of the people at this meeting are employees of the governor of New York. But reInvent Albany suggests that we have a section on COOG, mission, role, capacity, funding, independent governance. And I think that's something that we David and I wanted to have a meeting 3 years ago to discuss exactly this. We wanted to have a retreat where we talked about what do we want to see happening with our little committee. The thing that has me most concerned today, and has for about 6 years though, is the composition, the actual composition of our committee. Because at the moment I am the only public member that is either vacant or in holdover status. This began under Governor Cuomo, and the State Department acknowledged that it was a problem and said that they would fix it. At that point, we had 2 vacancies. When Governor Hochul came in, we got wonderful noises about appointing, filling those vacancies and confirming that the appointees, existing appointees still wanted to hold their position, and then confirming them. And now they don't even reply to our emails and letters. It's a serious problem. It's not how this committee was supposed to function, was with a vast majority of governmental entities and a small and dwindling number of not in holdover status public members and 2 vacancies. And the vacancies have now been with us for 5 or 6 years, and it distorts the dialogue, it distorts our annual report, and it's just not what was intended. It's not what the law requires. The law requires that there be a certain number, 2 journalists, and it requires that there be a certain number of public members. And I don't know what we need to do to get, the governor's staff's response has gotten less and less enthusiastic over the last 2 years. I have emails saying, people have been chosen, they're in the vetting process, we're gonna have something in a couple of weeks. I've got a whole series of those emails, and then nothing. It means we're not functioning the way we should be even if, you know, by happenstance we produce good work and good everything else, we are not compliant with our law. And I think if it drags on much longer, we ought to have, if not a separate section, at least a comment that says this committee is not, forget revising it, we're not even composed the way the law specifies that we must be. And it's largely because the governor has not done what first he and now she needs to do. And I realize you're all employed by her, and it doesn't matter to you, but as the only public member in good standing, I'd like to put in a plug for our being compliant with the law.
Let me say that the public members that are in holdover status are statutorily in good standing under the general construction law.
I know they are.
Okay, just not to cast dispersions, but this is heard, Franklin, I hear you. And I think that the legislature has made several proposals that would alter the functioning of the committee and how the committee is supported by the secretariat. But those are all proposals, and perhaps we can craft a section where we're commenting on those proposals, and we can highlight some of the issues that have come up that you've raised, Franklin, when we comment on those pieces of legislation that are desiring a different way of utilizing this body. Does that make sense? It might start, just start the dialogue. I'm not suggesting it will be the end of the dialogue.
We don't know what else to do.
I don't, it's been a while since I've been to a New York newspaper publishers meeting. My son goes now. But I would be very interested in what Michelle Ray or Diane Kennedy would recommend that all of the members of the news media of New York State put together a combined letter that they all signed to say, come on, Governor, please.
Well, I know the good government groups have done that already, and no result. And certainly our executive directors have done that for at least 6 years, maybe 7 years. It's been, I mean, there's really, it's unbelievable. And this is not a committee that requires someone, you know, with a PhD in neuroscience. You can throw a stone in New York City and hit someone who would have enough qualifications to be able to serve on this committee. I just can't understand why the governor has refused, and at this point it has to be refused, to comply with her statutory duty to appoint people to this committee. And the same with Governor Cuomo before. And I know you're employed by her, so I'm not expecting all of you all to but it
again,
needs
Franklin,
to be said.
I am embarrassed by my craft. There have been some 52 newspapers in New York State, of which only 2 are small independent newspapers anymore. There are larger newspapers, there are chain newspapers. But having a crusty curmudgeon editor is a very, very rare breed in New York. And,
but the journalist, it doesn't need to be a small newspaper. It's supposed to be someone in the media. So you could have someone from NBC, someone from the New York Times, someone from the Brooklyn Eagle.
Excuse me, but I'm talking about when you get into corporate media, whether it's in print or whether it's electronic, you have a problem with journalism in this country. And one of the things that we should be doing, or as individual members of this committee, particularly you or particularly me, is we should be going to see Diane Kennedy and saying, carve out 10 minutes for me, because I should be advocating outside of this group to have those positions filled. Doesn't fall upon this committee to necessarily advocate that. It's much stronger, not even a citizens advocacy group, but a media advocacy of the fact that we can't do our jobs without the government doing its job.
I agree, whatever it takes.
So, did I spare you a job?
Again, the way I view this role is that that this is not an entitlement, and that this is the way that the Secretary of State has chosen to support the functioning of you all. The Secretary of State could have chosen any number of ways, including to rotate this job amongst you. So, I guess you got to think about that. But this is just, I view this as obviously healthy dialogue, and I'm always interested in the legislative proposals. We recently had an article in the Gazette, the Schenectady Gazette, that talked about one of the legislative proposals that Kristen went through and really advocated for. I thought it's all very interesting, and we can weave that in and weave this topic in any number of ways that are both meaningful and respectful and palatable. So we'll try to figure out how to do that. That's the magic, and we'll try to figure out how to make that.
Well,
magic.
with that being said, Shoshana, what is the next item on the agenda?
If I could just a point of clarity here, Franklin, I am not paid by or never have been the governor of New York State.
The next item on the agenda is other, which I guess this falls into. So, but it was sort of nominally is something that was proposed in the materials that we were talking about. But this idea was, the other idea was sort of, I guess, to incorporate algorithms and any other topic that anyone wanted to raise, sort of for the first time. I know we talked about algorithms last year. David's proposal this year is an expansion on that, and again, it's going to be in the draft that I circulate. And anything else, maybe even that you don't think about this minute, but that you want to send me a note about, happy to incorporate that. But there is in the materials that we posted an update containing judicial decisions that have occurred since we last reported. They all focus on FOIL. There haven't been any really meaningful open meetings law decisions in this past time period. But there have been a number of interesting FOIL decisions we will include. Just wanted to make sure that you all got early information about that, and we'll obviously update that if any other ones come out before the report. And then our special report on OML 103A implementation that we're going to include as part of our general annual report because they're due at similar times. We have been working on, and it will be in the draft that we circulate to you, and it will contain, as much as possible, a synthesis of all of the feedback that we got from our project, and I guess a bottom line about what we think, how we think it's gone, and if we think that more can reasonably or should reasonably be done, or less. We'll see how that comes out. And then just before we get to public comment, which was the penultimate item, I'll skip to the last one because we can do public comment last. But Franklin, you and I touched base earlier on Executive Law 203B, so that's just great. Our deadline's November, so I just wanted to make sure that because it's October, we're reaching the finish line there, and we'll get that posted as soon as we have all of those data. And any other new business before we head to the comments? No? Okay, I'm gonna ask Kristen to just take a look and see if anyone has raised their hand and wants to tell us something.
We have 3 attendees that appear to be listening in today. And if anyone would like to raise their hand, if they would like to take advantage of the public comment period. No one appears to be raising their hand in the list of 3 attendees. Let me just check. The only other option maybe would be to just double check chat to make sure that there's nothing in the, I don't know if we have chat enabled. Sorry. Chat, there we go. I don't see anything in chat. I don't see any hands raised, so I don't think we have any public comment today.
Okay. Again, not to rush anyone with other business. Does anyone have any other business before we adjourn? All right. What I will do is within the next couple of weeks, you'll see something from me. And then based on the reactions that we get from that, we'll pick a date to meet. I've asked Candace to reserve as many dates as she can get so that we can propose as many as possible to everyone and hopefully land on one that works in the time, period that we have to further to finalize the report. But I'll send a draft out. Hopefully we can get consensus on the pieces that I circulate, and so the next draft that we talk about is really close to where we want to be, and hopefully we'll be able to agree on it. And so that's the plan for this coming month and a half. And I'm very hopeful. I'm very positive about where we're gonna get. So with that being said, I'll take a motion to adjourn, and we'll hopefully do that. There's a motion, and
Second.
there's a second, and hearing no objection, we are adjourned at 2:06. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
DOS.
I would love, Franklin hit upon obviously something I'm very, very interested in, which is postmodern